So very happy to do it.
So where we're digging here is the village of Gisua. And so this is a village that started, in the late 1200s or early 1300s. And the Jemez Valley here was really heavily populated.
I'm doing a bucket list item. I always wanted to do an archaeology dig.
Life's a garden, dig it. There's a piece of bone, though.
Most of them were first-time diggers, as well as myself. This is my first time digging, so it's pretty exciting and trying to dig and figure out what we can find down at the bottom.
People that want to participate, they first have to become friends of Coronado and Jemez historic sites. And then we do a day of orientation and training.
I get to touch, I get to imagine what it was like. I can look through different eyes at this place, the people that used to live here.
A projectile point?
But the artifacts that come out are going into our museum exhibit, which is actually serving as our field lab, so that visitors can come and see what we found and then see the tremendous amount of cultural resources that come out of these places. There's always been this kind of wall between archaeology and the public, and it's kind of this mysterious thing that happens, and then all of a sudden, it's published in, a book or in National Geographic or something. Our goal is to really connect people with history, and what better way than to let them dig into it.
On the eastern edges of Las Cruces on Dripping Springs Road is the Farm and Ranch Heritage Museum. The 47 acres comprising this museum, the interactive exhibits throughout the property, and all of the animals living here, sheep, goats, cattle, and more, make this a must while you are here in town. Beyond livestock, their outdoor exhibit also features a vast collection of antique farm equipment spanning the different eras of agriculture. But once you make your way inside, the exhibits reach further back into our farming history, 4,000 years. With ample supply of salvaged materials and artifacts, this museum has created a vibrant and tangible chronology for its visitors. Vignettes staged throughout the space allow you to imagine what life was like for earlier generations of New Mexicans, who toiled and struggled to make a life for themselves here. Beyond the images and biographies displayed on the walls, the museum's curator, Tony, offers me more insight.
So I'm wondering what the historical significance is of having a museum like this in Las Cruces.
One of the unique aspects about New Mexico's agricultural history is that it does go back by 4,000 years, but the Las Cruces area was one of the first areas to experience the wondrous thing that must have been corn and its cultivation. And the valley really came into its own in terms of agricultural production with the building of Elephant Butte Dam. And so Elephant Butte probably is what made agriculture really possible in southern New Mexico.
So speaking of that, in this museum, does it tell a story of the different exhibits?
When we entered this room, we walked by a reconstructed pit house. People often interpret that pit house as New Mexico's first farmhouse. And in many respects, it actually was.
Right.
The town center that we have over in this portion of the gallery, that relates to the time of around statehood. We have a general mercantile, and what a mercantile would have been like in a rural area where agricultural people would have come in to purchase things that maybe they didn't have or make or grow on the farm or the ranch. But the mercantile is a real different immersion experience for people because it really shows them how far we've come. The mercantile is very different from the big box stores that you and I shop at today. And what I find really neat is when I encounter visitors that come in and they can relate to what they're seeing there. And so for that reason alone, it's important that our children, our citizens understand and know where their food comes from and the history behind that. It took 150 generations from that 4,000-year-old agriculture that I spoke of earlier to get us to where we are. And so those stories are important for us to understand where we've been, helps us to make better sense of why we are where we are, and will hopefully help us plan for the future and make it a better future for all of us.
Tony sure knows how to put things in a greater context, and the museum aids in this effort. With live demonstrations and even some hands-on instruction, you can make a greater connection to skills and crafts that have passed down generation to generation.
And then we'll just take 2 or 3 like this across manually, stop, turn.
There we go.
So you'll have the feel. Yes.
There we
Please
go.
learn. You got it. You got the rhythm.
Traditional techniques of iron and steel smithing, as seen in the blacksmith shop, have also been taught in workshops and classes offered by the museum. But perhaps one of the most exceptional things I had the opportunity to partake in while I was here was the annual blessing of the fields. This rich tradition has been played out for more than 17 years at the museum. Honoring the story of San Isidro, the patron saint of farmers, a local priest or bishop leads a procession around the grounds, blessing the animals, plants, and acequia of the museum. For people who grew up in the Mesilla Valley, this age-old custom is a part of life, and harkens back to workers in San Miguel who would make a pilgrimage each spring, stopping in villages along the valley, concluding with a fiesta. Our dependence on the land and its resources, especially our water, resonates. And it makes me grateful traditions like this have held steadfast in this community, honoring the land, the life it gives. Another way to appreciate this region's agricultural bounty is to visit the weekly farmers and crafts market downtown. With more than 300 vendors, there's an abundance of fresh produce, preserves, plants, and artisan products for sale. So much you may not know where to begin. First stop, I recommend grabbing some breakfast at one of the food trucks to help fuel you as you wander. And remember to bring your own tote bag so you can really load up.
New Mexico feels like home to me.
In the heart of Santa Fe sits the Palace of the Governors, appropriately named as it was constructed in the early 1600s as Spain's seat of government for what is today the southwestern portion of the United States. With the different governing forces of the times, the palace changed hands over the years. You can only imagine if these adobe walls could talk. But as part of the New Mexico History Museum, the many eras of the building's life are represented in the collections you will find exhibited here. The Palace of the Governors houses more than 400 years of New Mexican history, from Spanish colonization to the Santa Fe Trail, the Civil War to the Rough Riders, and collections highlighting figures such as Kit Carson, Lew Wallace, D.H. Lawrence, Pancho Villa, and Juan de Oñate. This is a place where multiple visits will continue to enlighten and inform you, and it seems like the ideal place to get some more history on El Camino Real. I'm meeting with the museum's interim director, John, to gain his perspective on the trail.
So John, can you tell me about some of the history of the Palace of the Governors?
Yes, well, the Palace of Governors started about 1610. So this is the oldest continuously inhabited public building in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So this was the building for the royal city here of northern New Spain.
Okay.
And it was also a place where not only governors, but soldiers came to. It's a place where priests came to. And then settlers came here and then dispersed around northern New Mexico. You can imagine their relief when they finally came here after about 6 months of traveling over desert, over mountains, through some lands where there might have been hostile Native American attacks. And this was a safe haven for that end of the journey.
So John, take me back to what the El Camino Real was like back then, because this was the destination, but what was that experience? What was that journey like for people?
So it's 1,500 miles from Mexico City to Santa Fe, over deserts, over mountains. A good day's travel was about 12 miles. So just imagine, and you didn't ride. I mean, you didn't burden your horse by riding it. So you walked almost that whole 1,500 miles. Once you got here to Santa Fe, this was one of the most remote parts of the Spanish Empire around the whole world, because it took so long to get here. It was so difficult to get here. So people who came here had to be motivated to get here. So what were the reasons for coming here? Well, for some of them, it was an opportunity, hopefully, to find gold or silver. Originally, that played out pretty quickly that there wasn't a whole lot of gold or silver here. But it was a place to set up a settlement of their own, a hacienda, a place where they could grow the crops, raise livestock, raise a family. Maybe they had a failed business in Spain or Mexico and they wanted to get away from their creditors. Maybe they wanted to get away from the religious persecution of the order of the Inquisition. So maybe they were converted Jews in Spain who converted to Catholicism.
The crypto Jews.
Crypto Jews, exactly. And then they came to Santa Fe in northern New Mexico to get away from the Inquisition. And so settled here. So they were outsiders. Priests came here as well because they wanted to not only administer to the faithful, the Spanish and Mexican faithful, but they also wanted to convert Native Americans. So Santa Fe, northern Mexico, has been a place for outsiders to come throughout the centuries.
Wow. Everyone thinks, oh, the gold rush and everybody moved east to west, but a lot of people just have been here for so long.
And kind of along those lines, Michael, we, as you said, east to west kind of is our thought of migration. Back before the United States came into New Mexico, that route of migration was north to south, south to north, and that was along the Camino Real. That was the axis, north to south. If you wanted to go someplace that was the capital, you went down to Mexico City, you went south. That's where New Mexicans got their governance, that's where they got their architectural styles, their clothing styles. They looked south, not east. And then when the Santa Fe Trail came in 1821, that axis shifted from north-south to east-west. And then people in Santa Fe started looking east to the United States. But think of this, people were in the Palace of the Governors 200 years before the first person slept in the White House.
Wow.
And the colony of New Mexico and Santa Fe was started about the same time as the English colony in Jamestown.
Yeah, that gives you some perspective for sure.
The Palace of the Governors is just one of the buildings comprising the New Mexico History Museum campus. So make sure to visit the new building of the museum behind the Palace of the Governors and the living history exhibit of the Palace Press, also right off the interior courtyard. Don't miss the exposed excavated portions of the adobe puddled walls that were created during the Native American occupation of the palace from 1680 to 1692. A great mini road trip from Ruidoso is a cruise along the Billy the Kid scenic byway. Packed with history that inspired countless books and movies, and legends that have grown stronger with time, this trip invokes a sense of what it meant to really live in the Wild West. My first stop along the route is at Fort Stanton, a fort initially established in 1855 to help protect early settlers from raids by the Apache Indians. I met up with Larry Pope, the fort's site manager, to learn more about the earlier life and times of this fascinating place.
This place is like a whole time capsule. I feel like I'm in another era.
You are. Come see what we've got.
Okay. So what's the historical significance of Fort Stanton?
Fort Stanton has got a long history, and if you look at the architecture of all the buildings that's surrounding, it's indicative of the many different eras that we have here.
The fort, in its many incarnations, operated as a tuberculosis hospital and as an internment site for German merchant seamen during World War II.
This building here was built in 1855, originally as a barracks for the fort at that time. During the hospital years, it was converted into a dining hall and a kitchen facility. But this is one of our newest reconstructions. What we've done is we brought the visitor back into 1858 by remaking that barracks. Well, this is an example of one of the bunks that we have here at the fort. And this is actually a 4-man bunk. 2 men on top and 2 men on bottom.
In that tight space.
In that tight little space, they would sleep head to toe. What you would get is extra body heat. You get to share blankets and everything. And this is where the term bunkie comes from, if you ever heard that one.
Situated along the picturesque Rio Bonito, you can see why this land was such a draw for early settlers, and why so many travelers still venture to this part of Lincoln County today. And as much as I hate to leave, I'm excited for my next stop, Lincoln, New Mexico, the old stomping grounds of one of the state's most notorious historical characters, Billy the Kid. As soon as you pull into Lincoln, it's as if you are stepping back in time. The town is perfectly preserved, and you can't help but to feel like you're going to run into Pat Garrett, John Chisholm, or Billy the Kid in the Regulators on any given corner. This town was the hot seat for the Lincoln County War, a range war between rival factions in 1878 in what was then the New Mexico Territory. The amount of history here is mind-boggling. Thankfully, I was able to have the monument's manager, Gary Cousins, to show me around and break some of it down for me.
Lincoln is one of the 8 historic sites in the state of New Mexico.
Gary started off the tour with one of the most popular sites in Lincoln, the Tunstall store. John Tunstall was a prominent rancher and merchant whose operation rivaled that of James Dolan, just down the road. Tunstall had Billy the Kid and the Regulators on his side, but Dolan had an army of his own, and the rivalry would go down in history.
Tunstall said there was a lot of money to be made in Lincoln County, and he intended to make half of it. But he underestimated James Dolan. And about 20-30 miles southeast of here on February 18th, 1878, Tunstall was murdered out in the middle of nowhere, and that's what started the Lincoln County War.
That was the spark.
That was the spark. Billy the Kid was in this window right back up here with Ollinger's double-barrel shotgun, and Ollinger came to this point right here, and Billy the Kid leaned out the window and said, "Hello, Bob," and gave him both barrels of his own shotgun.
So at the end of the day, while the town may appear as it did back in the 1800s, thankfully the Wild West antics are no longer a threat. Fort Stanton and Lincoln aren't the only highlights on this stretch of road. Be sure to check out the architecturally captivating Spencer Theater, as well as taking time to visit Smoky Bear Historical Park in Capitan. After being rescued from the Capitan Mountains as a cub in 1950, Smoky went on to become the living symbol for forest fire prevention. And his final resting place is right here in Capitan. A wonderful place for children of all ages, this site features exhibits, educational programs, and gardens to enjoy. Before you hit the road, here's some things to keep in mind. Check out the calendar of events at Fort Stanton for military reenactments and candlelight tours. The Lincoln Historic Site is open 7 days a week, but on Sundays you can get free admission with your New Mexico ID. Children under 16 are always admitted for free.
We do have de facto the largest collection of fossils in the state of New Mexico. We have over 65,000 specimens here at the museum, some of the highlights of which are displayed in our exhibit halls. We also have a one-of-a-kind startup gallery, which highlights the start of the personal computer revolution that actually started here in Albuquerque. And also we have award-winning planetarium and our Dynamax Theater. Well, I think first of all, it starts out as kids because everything starts with kids. And when kids sort of find out about dinosaurs, they see these giant sort of majestic animals that sort of can sort of awe them and also sort of terrify them. But then when they find out they've died millions of years ago, there's enough sort of space where they can be sort of excited about it, but it's not going to hurt them. So it's almost like real life dragons. We have these animals that lived millions of years ago. They're really cool. They're really awesome. And yet they're not waiting around the corner, waiting under their beds to attack them. Generally, we get a lot of kids and people who have kids, and we're also trying to capture sort of the young adult market as well. We want this museum to be your favorite museum. We want people to come here and feel like they can come back year after year, month after month, and get a new experience every time they come. So maybe one time they come and see a new exhibit, next time they come and see some special programming we're offering, maybe a new lecture or a new sort of social event, etc. So we want to try to constantly keep it fresh for people so that people are constantly coming back and enjoying our museum month after month, year after year. The people who come through our museum say it's a great museum. I love to bring my kids here. And generally, we get a lot of people who just come over and over again. And that's what we really want to see. We want to see people coming back and seeing what's new. Generally, people come in and see the dinosaurs. And especially if they have kids with them, they're happy because the kids are happy and they get to sort of see get to see the big wide-eyed look from the kids. And that's all they're really looking for.
Can you see the sunrise going through the trees? It's glowing through the tall pines and it's shining down on me. I don't know if you know exactly what this means, but can you hear the birds sing? Can you hear the birds sing? I can hear mountains calling me, calling me, calling me.
because that could be a
Oh, it
learn.
says create again. It says this connection is not private. This website may be impersonating Titan Industries.
Hey
guys,
how's it going? Wow.
All right.
Kenny, I am loving the stuff that's going on in your background, dude. What?
Yeah.
Look
at that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have a candelabra that has a French accent and is alive? That's like something straight out of Beauty and the Beast. This is amazing.
Yeah, I'm in an old jail cell in Ruidoso, and Kenny's in an antique shop in New Orleans.
Oh my God!
Oh,
it's so
nice.
Cool. What?
Well,
right.
I have an old fading couch that I was thinking of laying
awesome.
on and lying on. Right?
All right. I'm gonna bring Steve in. I kicked him out because he was having a side conversation. So we'll get started. Hey, Steve, can you hear us?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be.
Well,
Hi, yeah. How are you guys?
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys too. Thanks so much for
Good to
joining
see
us.
ya.
We really appreciate it.
No
so,
problem.
I don't even know how to get started. I'm gonna start by saying that I absolutely love Brandon's Val Kilmer Doc Holliday shirt, and we appreciate the Wild West keeping it themed. So
Mustafa bought that for me, actually. Funny enough.
Nice.
I'm going for it today. You know?
The whole team's a big team fans, except Brian. He doesn't watch anything that doesn't.
Gotcha. So we just wanted to have a little kind of informal conversation with you guys about your experience at Fort Stanton, and honestly, we have not talked to you guys since this is the first time we're talking since you guys finished your investigation, other than the reveal, of course. And watching the show live tonight, that was the first time we had seen it. It was kind of interesting to see our own reactions on TV. So we got some questions from some folks in the audience, but I thought I'd start off just by asking you guys if you wanted to follow up on kind of your experiences and your reaction to the show tonight and so forth and so on, and kind of get the conversation started that way.
Mustafa, go ahead, man.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I'll say that I love the way that the show is shot, and I think that we did capture a lot of Fort Stanton's beauty, and I hope that we could have captured a lot of its illustrious history. But I'm just saying this right now, like, I cannot wait to go back. This whole COVID-19 stuff kind of messed with my plans on coming back there with my family. And I really, I sound like a salesman right now, but I really encourage everybody, if you have a chance to visit Fort Stanton, you absolutely positively have to go. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And the other thing that's really cool is, we can really show viewers a lot of things in the show. That you can hear things that we've heard, you can see the things that we saw. But the one thing that is very, very hard to capture, and I'm talking with Samsung to see if they can create this, maybe a vibe of vision, so you can just get the vibe of the buildings there. And that's something that Fort Stanton, all the buildings on the compound and in the area, they just all have such very unique and amazing vibes, and it's unlike any place I've ever been to, and it's absolutely wonderful. And I love how passionate you guys are about preserving the history. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mustafa's the same sentiment as Mustafa. I love Fort Stanton. I've always been a huge fan of the American Southwest, and I just love Fort Stanton. I mean, I actually read about it in a book that my grandfather gave me called Forts of the Southwest, funny enough. But Fort Stanton was in there, and I've read about it many times and never thought in a million years I would actually be able to visit it, and let alone investigate the reports of hauntings there. But I've always read into the Lincoln County War, which took place not too far from there. I know Billy the Kid was held there as well. Mm-hmm. And so much history, to think about, the internment camp there, to think about the Apache Wars and all that different types of history. But then you throw this tuberculosis hospital on top of it. It's just unlike anything I've ever seen. I mean, so many layers of history, probably the most of any location I've ever been, which is an amazing place. Amazing.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head. We at New Mexico Historic Sites, one of the most awesome things that we get to do is we get to experience these places on a daily basis. And sometimes I think we kind of take them for granted. The amount of shared history that's happened at Fort Stanton over the years is just amazing.
And Kenny especially gets to spend, and our other staff there, Larry Pope and others, they get to spend all their time there. And it's really refreshing sometimes to see people who haven't had that experience come in, and we kind of get to live vicariously through them because the excitement's there again. It reminds us how awesome our jobs are and how beautiful the place is and how historic it is. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful place. I mean, it's just to this day, I mean, I still think about it. I know we shot in, what was it, November, I believe, is when we were there.
Yeah.
It has not left my mind since we've been there. I'll just say it that way. It's seriously, truly amazing.
Well, I think I speak for everybody when I say that you guys have an open invitation. Steve, Kenny, you guys agree with that, right? I think so.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Yeah, we'd love to have you back and show you around the rest of the county, and so.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. We'd love to come back.
I'm gonna get some of that red chili pistachio brittle when I come back. I can't stop eating it.
Oh, we can send you some of that. We've got more.
Good.
So great. So I got a couple of questions from some folks in the audience, and then before I do that, though, I think I was just gonna. I have a couple questions myself, but then I was gonna let Kenny and Steve ask some questions first, and kind of because I'm sure they got some things going through their mind. So, gentlemen, if you guys have any questions or anything, I think now's a good time to ask them. Kenny?
Can't really think of any offhand. When we actually get to the reveal stuff, I do know that there was a lot of stuff that actually got cut out of it.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of really cool stuff, but I understand the time issue. But I don't think people realize that, everything that you guys do and everything that you put into this, I mean, you guys did a lot of work. But at the same point, they don't get to see all of the stuff that you did and even all the stuff that you ended up finding. So I just think that's amazing, but we'll get to all that stuff when we get to a lot more of the details on that.
Thank you for the kind words.
Steve, any immediate questions?
Yeah, you never know what's going to be edited out, so it was really a great experience to see the whole episode, and some of it was totally vivid to me, and then some of it, of course, I never saw your perspective of it going into those buildings at night, because I don't go into those buildings at night. So it's so cool to see what you got to experience. It was even cool to see where Kenny and I live, just from that perspective of, it is haunting to look at, but, great cinematography. And it was just really cool to see the finished product. I agree. There were things in the reveal that weren't necessarily highlighted. So I was kind of like, wow, that was, to us in that reveal, it was very vivid, and maybe it wasn't as vivid in your reveal, but it was a very riveting episode. And I hope, the general public feels the same way. Can't wait to. My phone's been, of course, blowing up the whole time. So friends of mine from all the country have been saying, "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Why are you living there?" funny reaction.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. Our job as stewards of Fort Stanton, is multifaceted. But one of the things that we're really and passionate about is just educating people that it's even here. We have so many people who even live in the area, the region or the state, that have no idea that Fort Stanton's here. So, I think this is a great opportunity for us, and we just like to thank you guys for taking us seriously. When I made the call for you guys to help us and come out, you guys were, more than willing to come out to a pretty rural area and help us out. And, I've in my professional career, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different, organizations that come out in the film and documentaries and things like that. And I honestly can say that I have not worked with a more professional crew than the Ghost Hunters crew. You guys were, fantastic. You guys have a wonderful work ethic. And like Kenny said, I don't think people realize, it's all squashed down into a 1-hour show. But you guys put some time in and effort. We talked for hours with you guys about the history of Fort Stanton, and you listened and you were interested the entire time, and that really means a lot to us, and we really appreciate that. So you guys are definitely welcome back anytime. And
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this first investigation definitely brought forth some more questions, probably a lot more questions than answers, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say,
one of the big things for us, is anytime we go to a location like this, I mean, bringing awareness to a historical place like Fort Stanton is key. That's one of the biggest things for us. I've been doing this for about 16 years now, and one of my biggest goals getting into the field and trying to investigate the paranormal was bringing awareness to historical places such as Fort Stanton. I think there's no better way, or at least, you're giving an avenue for people that typically aren't interested in the historical aspect through the paranormal by showing them the history and saying, hey, look, in some capacity, you may be able to actually live with this history and speak with this history. So, investigating the paranormal is almost like, living history in a sense. And I think that that's a really big goal for us at Ghost Hunters as well. Right, Mustafa?
100%. I mean, I could have probably talked with Kenny that entire week. And just the things that we were learning, like right after the other. I mean, you were just an encyclopedia of knowledge, man. And, for us, anytime we get, you say like, oh, I'm happy you took it seriously. It's like, I was sold on the place right when we walked in. I'm like, I don't even need to see any paranormal claims or anything. And then we went in and we learned about the history, and then we ended up capturing what we captured. I don't think it's a coincidence. I really don't. I think that when you have a lot of history and it's evident that you guys, because if you guys care that much about Fort Stanton, imagine all the other people who have gone through this whole time. It means so much to you. That's not an accident. So if it means a lot to you, then it means a lot to the entities. And if it means a lot to the entities, there's probably going to be, theoretically, more paranormal activity. And I think, we kind of proved that hypothesis correct.
No, I thank you so much. And yeah, we do care about this place, and it's great to meet people who also care about it. So I'm getting a bunch of questions. You guys okay if we just kind of jump into them?
Let's do it.
So I'm gonna start with the softball question, some that we can answer. So April via Twitter asked, what years some of the buildings that you guys investigated date to, and that, like I said, you guys interviewed us for hours about the history of that place, and I think that your producer was like, okay, this is insane. There's just too much stuff going on here. How are we gonna boil this all down? So, probably the biggest question is the hospital itself. So that hospital was built in 1936. And it was built on top of other buildings that had been there dating back to the 1850s when it was a military post. So that building itself, and when it opened up, and Kenny can attest to this, he's done a lot of research on the hospital. That place was state of the art. Oh, yeah. It was probably the best equipped hospital in the American Southwest, hands down. And the doctors and the nurses that we're working with were the best trained, and the care that patients got there was the best. Kenny and Larry and the other folks at Fort Stanton, they worked so hard to get that place open to the public. And it is now, at least the front part of the hospital is an exhibit. So you can actually walk in and experience that space, but it dates from the 1930s. But the other buildings, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Kenny, you want to talk about the laundress quarters since you live there?
Yeah, the laundress quarters was actually built in 1876. It was actually 4 separate buildings, and in 1927 they ended up connecting them all together. So like my personal apartment is actually 2 of the original laundress quarters that they combined together, and my kitchen is actually part of that expansion that they did in 27. You guys actually investigated apartment 1, which currently doesn't have electricity, but it's where a lot of reports have come from. So like even during the reveal, one thing that you guys cut out, and I kind of wanted to bring up on all that too, was you talked about the swing of the doors going, the direction of the hill. I didn't mention it in the reveal, but one thing that I noticed when we went back and you guys talked about how it could just be swinging with the natural grain of the land. Yeah. My door opens the opposite direction, so it's swinging uphill. But we never actually had that in the reveal, and we never actually looked at my specific door. But a lot of the other buildings around that area do have a really important history as well. And one of the more important ones, I think, is the chapel. And do you want me to talk about that one too, Tim, or do you want to go about
Yeah, actually, I've got a question about the chapel. So, yeah, in the show, you guys were investigating in the chapel and you heard some noises and things. And in the reveal, we talked about those noises. And it didn't, just for time editing and stuff, we really didn't get to talk about that. The chapel, it's a unique building on the campus because it actually isn't on its original location. It was picked up stone by stone and moved to that location after another building was destroyed. So yeah, Kenny, if you want to elaborate, that's fine.
Yeah, because that part of the building was actually part of the original barracks they built in 1855. When the hospital came in 1899, they were using it as dormitories, but the original tuberculosis hospital ended up burning down in 1905. And at that point, they converted it into a makeshift hospital. And it actually was the operating room, that specific room, which is now the church. They actually used it as an operating room all the way until about 1919, when they finally made it into a Catholic church. But in 41, they ended up picking it up, moving it stone by stone, and reopened it. But it's pretty much been a church ever since then. But it was never originally built as a church. And like I said, it was an operating room for almost 14 years of its life.
So Pam Bonner asked us to elaborate a little bit on that church noise. And you guys talked a little bit, I don't know if you want to talk about that. We talked about it in the reveal about the pews and things like that. Do you guys want to talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, for sure. I could just say from my experience. So when you have a case where there's so much compelling evidence, a lot of times a lot of the debunking stuff is taken out. And but I'm glad that they spent a lot of time showing how we tried to recreate the stuff on the EMCCD camera. But with the church, when Daryl and I were in there and investigating, there are noises in there, and there's noises on the roof. At first, we went in, we hear these noises, we're like, okay, what is that? And it's the heating system. There's a heating system in the church, no problem. But then all of a sudden, we started hearing what sounded like footsteps on the roof, and I was like, looking at Daryl, I'm like, that ain't the heating system. So we run outside, nothing's there. Okay, then we come back inside, and what wasn't shown is that there were more noises. And what had happened was they were coming from way in the back of the church where the organ started there. So we're conducting an investigation, and it's boom. And then we keep going with our questions, and then boom, boom. And it's getting closer and closer until finally it was literally right in front of me on the pew, and you could feel like vibration. Like there's nothing there. Like our camera guy went like jump back. I wish they left that footage in there. It would have been cool. Like you see the camera move back. I understand it's not the cleanest thing, but it was pretty nuts. Like that was really significant. And again, it all started when we talked about the history. We're asking people who were there and stuff. So again, it has to get edited and condensed down, but it was a really long process that finally culminated in something. So we thought we had a debunk, and then it's like, oh, something's pulling us back, and we couldn't.
Oh yeah, exactly. And Mustafa and Daryl weren't the only ones that had that experience in the chapel, which is really interesting. But first and foremost, if it was, say, an animal on the roof or something else, we know the heating system was making a little bit of noise, but on the roof, if there was an animal up there, even if they ran and jumped on the other side, you would still see the heat signature on the thermal imaging camera that they were using. So that was interesting. But the thing is, to me, when you're inside that location and you start to converse and have a conversation, you're hearing these sounds that Mustafa was talking about coming towards you almost in an intelligent way, which was really, really interesting. So that was a kind of a head scratching moment for sure. Definitely.
Gotcha. Let's see some other questions. So Jen wants to know what building has the most paranormal activity, and I'll pair this with another question. Some people have asked. Cody asked if Kenny or anybody else have had any experience since you guys left, and if activity has increased, decreased, if we've noticed any differences or anything like that. Kenny's shaking his head. He hasn't told me this. I think he's afraid I'm going to call somebody, call you guys back on speed dial or something.
I'll be there as soon as I can.
So, yeah. So Kenny, do you want to talk about any additional experiences since the investigation?
Well, really, after you guys left, everything really, really picked up. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I don't even know if you realize it, Tim, but literally the day after you guys left, when I was driving home, I got in a car accident and totaled my car.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that now.
But I mean, ever since then, especially the hospital activity has drastically picked up. People who have never had an experience, like Larry Pope, the other maintenance person at Fort Stanton, he had an experience, which is his first experience at Fort Stanton in 5 years. And his daughter won't even enter the hospital anymore because literally we were watching her walk down a staircase and her hair just went straight out and then went straight back down. And their dog was absolutely terrified to even go in the building. But we've had a lot more visitors even say that they're getting headaches instantly walking into the building, seeing weird shadows in the back. But it's also not really just confined there. Kind of on an unhappy level, I even think that things are starting to follow me back to Alamogordo when I come down and visit my family. Because even my family members have now mentioned seeing the shadow figures standing in the doorway when they wake up at nighttime. So things have definitely gotten a little more interesting since you guys were here. And I will definitely say after the reveal, I have definitely had nightmares about that black shadow figure multiple times. But I mean, even last night in my apartment, I was hearing footsteps walking around at 2 o'clock and they went on till 4 o'clock in the morning. So I didn't get much sleep last night. So. One other thing too, especially now that we've been closed because of this entire virus thing, there's been times I've gone into the hospital, check on it, and furniture has actually moved around. But I ended up switching all of our security cameras over to motion detection because we were just recording everything 24 hours. So I wasn't able to actually look at the videos to find out if things were actually, what was going on. But the building's locked. It has a security system. It has a camera system. But when I've gone back and checked some of the footage now from the security, it actually has a followed pattern that goes through all of our cameras through the entire building. But I still haven't actually captured any furniture moving, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, nothing like hearing that for the first time on a live stream as the boss. The guy. Thanks, Kenny, for dropping that on me.
Yeah. You're gonna like preempt us with this. He's actually right here.
Live, it's live.
That's on camera.
Yeah. Steve, what about you?
Of course, right after you guys left, I was just really hypersensitive to the whole, the reality of that. That reveal was pretty intense. I'm not somebody that goes in the buildings after dark very often. I live on site, but I'm not somebody that works in the buildings or closes them up every night. And you guys were there when it was getting dark pretty early. So, it was really, to close at 5 o'clock, you could have some of those experiences. I think I'm just so more hypersensitive to seeing some of what we saw and even hearing what we heard in that little black box, which didn't come across as much tonight in the reveal, but some of those things were so vivid. The sounds, there was a male voice in apartment 1, for example, that was just so clear. It wasn't as clear on tonight's show, but it really was striking. And of course, when you live there, you just seem a lot more aware of, okay, yeah, these things are happening. And a lot of your equipment, of course, is detecting things that the human eye can't see and the human ear can't hear. But it was just very compelling. So we really appreciate that whole experience. And if anything, I remember being interviewed afterwards and they said, "Are you going to sleep well tonight?" And I said, "I don't know, ask me tomorrow." Because I just didn't know how to respond. It was very shocking and scary and, very unique experience, I have to say. I really appreciate what you guys found.
So cool. And I'll just add to it too. I really appreciated what you guys and especially Grant talked to us. Off camera, completely, away from the limelight, so to speak. And it came up in conversation, and Grant especially said, "Look, you're probably, if you experience things here now, after we leave, you're probably going to experience things more because." In his experience and your guys' collective experiences, you guys were actively trying to reach out to whatever might be there. And now that door, so to speak, has been open, right? Yep. So you can expect that, like, there were a few days where there were a ton of people at Fort Stanton who are actively trying to make contact, right? So you would expect there to be residual attempts, you know what I mean? If that's what you believe is going on, that just makes sense. That, at least you guys still feel okay living there, right?
Yeah, I think one of the main things, and they didn't totally reveal either, is when Grant was talking about how, when you see these things, they're terrifying. And I mean, I've had nightmares about them because it's something I don't understand, and it is something that it scares me. But at the same point, even with it standing in my doorway, I have never gotten the impression that it is threatening or bad. It's just that unknown that's kind of causing a lot of the fear. But I've never experienced anything that I thought was actually out to harm me at Fort Stanton. So, I mean, I still feel completely fine being there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had limited experience. My story was just that I heard voices sound like a card game in the apartment next to me, which had the upstairs, apartment 3. And it was a pleasant thing. I thought it was actually some of the living historians that come and do reenactments and sometimes hang out in that apartment. And I didn't think anything of it as far as being freaked out by it until I found out that no, there were no living historians or anybody in there. And then months later, when I was out of town and someone was house sitting for me and she had the same exact experience, it was, of course, at that point where you go, oh, wow, that's fascinating. And yet I didn't want to let on to her that I had had the same experience because it really would have scared her. But I didn't feel threatened. And it was one of those experiences that was, oh, wow. It was a card game upstairs one night.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not going to pretend to know all the answers to this or anything, but like if you think about it, entities are more often than not just people. It's a person, especially if it's an intelligent one. So just like people, right? You're going to, if you feel uncomfortable, you don't want somebody to be there, and you feel like somebody's watching you. Sometimes just reaching out and saying like, hey, I'd appreciate it if I had some privacy right now, or it's like, I understand you might be trying to talk to me, but like maybe can we do this again at another time? And it's just letting them know and kind of using that politeness. And I've been on cases and investigations, and a few times where Brandon will say like, I'll be leaving, I'll be like, hey, everybody's trying to follow me out of here. You're not welcome. You're not invited. I'll be back tomorrow night. Wait for me here. And then, I've been pretty good for the most part.
Absolutely. So cool. Well, I got some kind of relatively personal questions for you guys, I guess. So we've had a couple of people ask, how, and I know you guys have answered this probably 100 times, but how did you get into paranormal investigation? What, this is a relatively new scientific field. What sort of training do you guys have in, experiential training, like things like that? How does that work? How did you guys get involved with this production? So,
I got involved in the field at a pretty young age. Well, I didn't start my first paranormal team until 2006, but in 1995, I lost my oldest brother to cancer. And in 2004, I lost another brother to suicide. And that kind of sent me into my journey into the unexplained and trying to find a possible existence of a life after death. I really never had a paranormal experience per se prior to that. Before I ever stepped foot in the field, I reached out to engineers, scientists, medical doctors, people that could help me remain grounded and remain in scientific principle as much as possible. And I started working with a man named Dr. Harry Clore about 10 years ago, and he's the only person in history to receive 2 PhDs simultaneously in any discipline, and he received those in physics and chemistry. And I've been working with him and working with other consultants over a number of years to help me remain grounded in scientific principle. Some of those that provided us the camera that we actually used at Fort Stanton that actually collected this amazing footage we got in the TB hospital. But yeah, I got started in 2006 and have been doing it ever since. And it's been a hell of a ride.
Awesome.
Yeah. For me, it was, I was very young. I was about 4 or 5. I had an experience in a haunted house that my father unknowingly purchased. He didn't know it was haunted. We were there the first night we moved in. my mom made dinner. We had moved in a bunch of like stuff from the cars, and I'm sitting there eating my mac and cheese and whatever. And my mom walks to the living room, and then she immediately calls out to my father, but she's speaking in Albanian, and that's where my parents are from. So I knew when they were speaking Albanian, I'm like, oh man, stuff's going down. This is serious. So like I snuck over there. I look in the living room and I see all the stuff that we had moved in. At the end of the living room was all pushed towards the other side, towards the door. And my mom was freaked out. She's like, nobody touched this. Nobody was in here. And my dad just like, told her like, don't worry about it, whatever. So then my older brother and I are sleeping in our bedroom upstairs, and then we start hearing later that same night, we start hearing all this activity, like noises and movement. So we start walking out, and we're going down the stairs. We're walking, and the sound's getting louder and louder, and then we're like, where's this coming from? And we're walking. Finally going to the kitchen, and we walk in there, and then we just stop in the doorway, and we can't believe what we see, and it's all of the cabinets in the kitchen are just moving, opening and closing by themselves. Pop, 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 pop. My brother and I looked at each other, we're like, this is awesome. And my mom comes downstairs, and she's like, kids go to bed, and she saw it too. And throughout our life living there, it was just a lot of crazy happenings. And I got into the paranormal because my parents, started blaming all of their misfortunes on this weird stuff that was happening in the house. And I was so sick and tired of them saying that for years and years and years. Even after we moved out of that house, I kind of went to go and investigate it and prove, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this place. And if there is something, like, I just didn't think that, paranormal was necessarily something bad. So I investigated it to kind of like exercise those demons in their head. That's like why they had all these bad things. It was very psychological for me. And I helped other Albanian and families and Muslim families in the area who are very superstitious, like in culture. And I would just kind of like, okay, try to help them with that. But in my attempt to disprove that there was paranormal activity or like demons, what they always thought, I actually ended up in a few instances of like more questions that I had answers to. And that's what I was like, ooh, this looks real. So then, after seeing the original Ghost Hunters team with Grant and seeing some of those principles, I started applying that, got a team together, and we just toured all of the tri-state area and went up and down the East Coast. And, I did some investigations overseas in Eastern Europe. So it was cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. I appreciate that. And, that just harks back on, I think sometimes, you guys are really well known, right? For what you do. And I think sometimes people forget that you guys are, you have a foundation in this discipline, right? You're not a television personality. The Brandon and the Mustafa that came out and met us, they came out and met us because they wanted to help us, right? Not because there was a camera crew with them. Yep. And all of you guys had those experiences and brought that sincerity to the investigation, and we certainly appreciated that. So yeah, cool. So we got some more questions. Let's see where we got here. Did you guys? I honestly can't remember. Actually, did you guys? Lewis wants to know if you guys did any investigating out at the internment camp. I know the campus is huge, 250 plus acres. I mean, the original military reservation was 1 million acres, right? So we're talking about a huge area. But I know you guys did some filming out there, but I wasn't sure if you did any actual investigations out there.
We did, yeah. Brian Murray went out there and did a isolation session. I don't know if you remember that. Oh, actually, it was when you were out there, Mustafa, and you went to the cemetery up there, the old Pioneer Cemetery that's up there on the hill that you guys have, off the property. Brian actually went and did what we call isolation sessions, where he was by himself in the internment camp. And so, yeah, we did investigate there. So there's, again, yet again, a situation where there was a lot more that we did that didn't make the 42 to 43 minutes that people saw tonight on the show. Sure. So, but yeah, Brian did an isolation session out there, and being that he was, in the military, Marine, and he was the best person to put out there. So we thought, throw him out there, see what happens. I know Mustafa was out in the cemetery by himself for a long time too.
Yeah, that was nuts. I actually, guys, they mentioned the episode like near Roswell site, right? And I don't know what the heck I saw out there, but I was sitting there alone in the cemetery trying to start a session going, no, nothing's happening, it's fine. But then across, because it's when your back's faced away from Fort Stanton and you're looking on that mountain range over there, I see some blue light come out behind the mountain range, circle all around the whole area, come back, go back down behind the mountain. And I was trying to record it on my camera. I didn't think you could pick it up because it's like all the way up in the sky. It's late at night. You see a little something moving. No idea what it could have been. Because at first I'm like, is it a plane? But it was moving in this weird circular fashion. Comes around and goes right behind me. And I was like, what's that? And I was like, now I knew it. I'm like, there's no way they're going to put this in the show because it has nothing to do with the stuff that we're finding. But yeah, I mean, that you want an instance of like, you know, us doing stuff that people never see. I mean, that was crazy.
Well, and I don't know if you knew, but I actually went to the occupational therapy building with your guys' camera person because the actual Roswell crash happened closer to Fort Stanton than it did to Roswell. But a lot of people don't realize that. But in occupational therapy, there's even some drawings that were left by previous patients of UFOs flying around Fort Stanton. And I went in there with the camera guy to actually take pictures of them for you guys' possible use in the episode. But while we were in there, there were loud knocks going on in the building, and there was stuff happening while we were just trying to get those photos of that specific one. So.
That's crazy.
Well, I'm gonna follow up that previous question. We have one more another question. Actually, you know, I've since the episode or since you guys came out, I've got to know you guys a little bit kind of from a distance because of your social channels and stuff. And I know you both have families. And somebody asked, Sarah asked, how do your families feel about what you do in terms of your paranormal investigations and things like that? I know Grant's been very open about the way his families feel about it and their connection to it, but that's a question for you guys too.
Yeah, my fiance Taylor, she's very interested in it, and I just had my first baby boy. He's about to be 3 months old tomorrow, so he's new. So we'll see what he thinks.
And I vote, Brandon. I vote Beetlejuice. Just so you know.
There you go.
I vote Beetlejuice. I'm a Tim Burton fan, so you look good.
Yeah.
You look good.
Beetlejuice all day, man. That's what I said too. The Hamburglers, not really my style either. So people always talk about the belly he's got. So you gotta throw hamburger.
I'm the hamburger. I'm the one who feels the burger.
But yeah, no, it's my family, even my my mother and my father, with the experience of them losing 2 children, they always had questions about that life after death aspect as well. So a lot of my family is very supportive of it, and they're always waiting and clamoring to hear what happened at the last investigation. So that's always kind of fun.
Awesome. When my family found out I was into paranormal investigating, they didn't believe me at first because I was always just a scaredy cat, chicken poop. I was like, my brother would scare me every single day. He'd hide behind doors. They loved terrorizing me as a kid. Just they loved it. And I guess it kind of I get more excited than anything on an investigation. Like even like in this episode when I turned to my family, I was like, hey guys, like I'm sorry. Like I was basically telling them I love them because I've known people who have been changed and altered by stuff that happened to them in investigations. I mean, Daryl with the House of Wills, Brandon, he tells us all the time, like, in Cleveland, and he brought back something with him that put him in a bad place mentally. But I don't know, like they are very, very supportive, especially because I literally did it just to help people. But in most cases, I go to these home cases and it's like, okay, it's not paranormal. You're just like, you drink too much and you hate your job. Like there's no curse, there's no evil demon. You're just in a bad relationship and your boyfriend hates you and you don't dump him. Like that's the problem. Like, so that's why I got into it. But then now I'm like, oh man, this stuff's real. Like, so it's pretty cool.
Great. Well, I'm going to switch gears real fast, but then I want to go ahead and start talking about, I think, what everybody wants to talk about, and that's the shadow figure. And I got about 20 questions here from people about that. And I've actually got some questions myself, and I'm sure Steve and Kenny do too. But real quick, Lorna asked us a very specific question on Facebook about a potential family member that was stationed or was a patient at the tuberculosis hospital. And it got me thinking, when we started putting out the information about this episode and especially this live feed, all of a sudden, and Kenny and Steve and I know this from living here. Fort Stanton has been a lot of things, but no matter what it was at any point, it was always a community.
Right.
People live there. And all of a sudden, as we got closer to the air date, we started noticing lots more comments on our social feed about, hey, my aunt lived there in the 1980s and I would visit her, or, hey, my dad worked there, or things like that. And, it really got us thinking that, the quasi-modern history of Fort Stanton, which is extremely important, especially considering the current public health crisis we're in, right? It's so appropriate. There are still people out there that have memories of Fort Stanton that can help us fill in a lot of gaps. So we've actually started a digital archiving project. We just launched it today, and people can go and check it out on our website. And I'll put this up there. There's the website right there, and just find the Fort Stanton page. And if you want to share some of your stories with us, or an image, or get in contact with us about doing an oral history, something more formal, you can do that too. But just that particular question from Lorna just reminded me that a lot of people have these personal connections, and we need help filling in a lot of the gaps. So
That's great.
Yeah,
That's so
just
great.
check it out.
Very cool.
And so next time you guys come back, we'll have even more information for you. So
I'm just gonna upload the Ghost Hunters episode to that. Like, that's my memory.
Awesome. There you go. So,
Van Hammer.
Cool. So I'm a historian, right? I'm a humanities person. I mean, I can barely, toast bread, right? So using a toaster. So I've been trying my best to understand this electron camera a little bit better. And we had some questions like, what's a photon event? What's this camera do? What spectrum does it look in? Why is, they're wearing black? Why does it show up like white? All these questions. I thought maybe to start with, just really quickly, Brandon, since you're like the expert on this, and you have the connections to your PhD colleague, could you explain a little bit about that camera?
Sure. Yeah, the EMCCD camera is an electron multiplying camera, and this camera is typically used by the digital imaging scientific community to record single photon events. So not only is it used by the scientific community to look at space, and NASA uses it, but also the military on the front lines. So this camera is enhancing the dark in ways that we've never seen before. So we're really getting a huge edge when it comes to looking into these locations at night and looking for what they call photon events. So photon events are light events. So typically photons are not seen by the human eye, but there are certain people out there that do possess an extra protein within their eye that they can see these photon events with their own eyes, which is really interesting. But to go even further, when we implemented this camera into our field and trying to use it to document the possible existence of ghosts or what we think are entities, I would reach out to these consultants that I've known for a number of years, and I would say, hey, from your point of view, if ghosts are real and people are seeing these entities or whatever it may be, how would they manifest? And one of the theories that was thrown at me was they may be manifesting through photon events, which again are light events. Okay. And even, to go even a step further, which is even more interesting, these photon events are carrying electromagnetic radiation, which we start to think about when we go out and look for EMF fields in the paranormal field. We're trying to see if there are anything that's not natural EMF, man-made EMF, and we get those spikes every once in a while. Now we start to look at, are these photon events possibly manifesting? Are these entities? Are these ghosts? And are these EMF spikes that we think we've been, recording for a number of years? Is that these photon events that we can't see with our own eyes? So, in a nutshell, that's basically what it is. This camera is detecting photons, or what is built to detect photons. And what's really interesting about the Fort Stanton footage and what we collected, not only initially beyond that doorway, through that window, you see that light go past, right? And you see something looks like it's walking from right to left. That was not detected by our own eyes. I was literally looking down at the monitor, looking up, and it wasn't there. So we start to think, is it infrared light? Is it possibly someone outside with infrared light? Because if it was a flashlight, we would have seen it with our own eyes. And not only that, in the footage itself, you can see Brian walking through with a flashlight, and it does not detect the way our eyes perceive flashlights in any way, shape, or form. But so the initial reaction was send Brian outside to see if it was infrared light, because we had a cameraman with us with infrared, and it did not show up the same way at all. So that's interesting within itself. But when Brian and the cameraman were outside, that's when we collect this amazing shadow figure, right? Now, what's really interesting about that is when we showed this footage to one of our scientific consultants, he was blown away, not only by the fact, one, it shows up very much like a human profile, but two, it is a complete absence of light. This camera is not built to detect an absence of light. So that to him was very interesting. So whatever this was seemed to be almost absorbing the matter around it to come out and, you know, make its move in whatever capacity that was. So that's even more interesting. So this camera is giving us a scientific edge that no one in the paranormal has used before or has recorded or detected. So I think that, you know, when you talk about Fort Stanton being the historical place that it is, I think we added to another piece of that history within itself.
Huh.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Just to add to what Brandon was saying, I mean, the other cool things it wasn't shown in the show because it's like, okay, there's no like claims associated with it, but when you remember that piece of footage you caught when you were recording outside and you had that light phenomenon in the trees, underneath the tree?
Yes, exactly.
That same area. So that's like a place where I believe you have the local Native American tribes come and they perform their blessing rituals there. It didn't really fit into like our claims that we had in there, but we had some really cool light phenomenon. Another thing is I spent hours, like I think some people might think like, okay, you have a CMCCD camera, the electron multiply camera, you know, something's gonna come up on it because that's just the way the camera is designed. It's just designed for stuff to come up, and who knows, it could be anything. But I've watched and sat through and reviewed hours of electron multiplying camera footage where there was nothing on it, and it's
exactly.
like it's very evident when something comes up on it. It's like how this thing materializes. And Brandon, you just said something that kind of just like I never even thought of until now. So one other thing, just to talk about the science for a second, we've been noticing whenever there's a lot of paranormal claims, there's been pressure changes on our data logger. It could very well be, Brandon. I don't know. It just happened about now. It's like you said, it's like sucking up the matter. That act itself might cause a change in barometric pressure as to why that could happen. So it's really cool when you have multiple devices all kind of corroborating the same like weird phenomenon that we can't explain.
Exactly. You know? And like going back from what Mustafa's saying, because of the footage we collected at Fort Stanton, and like this again for us guys, this is monumental. Like what we collected there is just, it doesn't happen. You know, I've been doing this for 16 years. I mean, I've not seen anything like that. But because of what we collected at Fort Stanton, we are now going further with that camera where we're putting data loggers around that camera to try and record all the environmental conditions, which we typically do that anyways with our investigations, but we're trying to put that directly in the line of sight of the camera because we're trying to see if there's a pressure change, humidity change, a temperature change, an EMF change. And if these photon events show up and we're starting to see these environmental changes with that, that's even going further with the science aspect. So it's exciting, man. It's just very exciting.
Very cool.
So a question for Kenny and Steve. People were asking, so, you know, I've never seen this shadow figure. Maybe I don't have that protein, like you said. You know, I think it's safe to say Kenny and Larry or Kenny and Steve are mutants. We're just going to call them that. That's their new term. So, no, so what you have experienced yourselves and what you saw on camera, do those two things mesh?
Very much. I'm kind of like Mustafa. I had experiences when I was a kid, and it has continued my entire life. It's actually what got me into paranormal research myself, because I'm part of the Lincoln Paranormal Society. But we've done multiple investigations in the hospital, and we have captured that shadow figure more on the staircase, the old original one, than we have anywhere else. But I have seen that thing multiple times. Like I said, with the Boy Scouts, I ended up seeing it. But I've also been in there a lot of the times with the NCCC, and we have all seen it in there together as well. The building that I actually see more shadow figures in would definitely be occupational therapy. I do not like being in that building at nighttime because they are pretty much everywhere, as well as the Hidalgo, which we just actually renovated into a dormitory. But when we first had our NCCC team go in there, they were experiencing a lot of things. And over a 2-day period, had 5 significant events, including 2 full body apparitions. And that was a building that I got cut just because, you know, there were so many other places that you guys had to investigate. But I mean, there's a lot more stuff going on out there than even you guys were able to experience. But I have seen it multiple times my entire life, but especially at Fort Stanton and mainly in occupational therapy. They're the 2 places that I see them the most.
Steve, what about you?
Well, I haven't had as many of the experiences with apparitions there. And I'm somebody that kind of shies away from walking around at night in the parade ground, or I certainly don't hang out in or around the hospital after hours, for sure. But my experience has always been, and I talked with a few of the crew about it, and it's more of a common experience of that feeling of being watched, particularly when pulling up to my house, my apartment, and just that moment between, you know, getting out of the car and getting into the door. There are times when I don't even think about it, and times when I feel the sense that there could be dozens of entities behind me watching me. Sometimes it's deer. They're at dusk every night. It's a pretty beautiful and poetic thing. Deer do come there and eat right at dusk. And Kenny experiences this too, because he's just 2 doors down. But then there are those times that I feel like, thank God I'm not on camera, because I will run from the car to the door. So that was just one of the more common experiences, but not haven't had the apparition experience yet.
Well, with the shadow figure, with the shadow figure that we collected, when Brian and our cameraman went outside to try and recreate that initial footage that we got right just beyond the doorway through the window pane there, I was in there alone, and I'll tell you guys, without a shadow of a doubt, there was someone else in that place with me. I could feel it. It's one of those sensations where you know someone's in there. And not only do you know someone's in there, I felt like someone was watching me. And little did I know, we captured this figure leaning out and looking out. And to me, it's like that figure was like, uh-oh, he's still there. I didn't realize that I was still there. I think that whatever this was, or whoever this may have been, thought that we left the building. And it kind of peeked out to see, and I think that it noticed I was there. That's why it, you know, kind of went back in like that. So I definitely had that sensation. So exactly what you guys were talking about, I felt that as well, very much so.
Oh, and you know, one of my favorite things that you guys actually captured, and you don't really see it in your guys' video, but for the actual reveal, you guys slowed down that footage of it going down and then going back. And if you actually pay attention to that video, even with what you guys showed on TV, at the very end, you can see it doing some light flickering. It's like it's illuminating its own light all of a sudden. Yeah. But when you actually paused it during the reveal, it looked like it was like a hat brim going on for top. And then it actually looked like you could see some fingers and stuff as well. And to me, that's what actually terrified me probably the most out of your guys' evidence, was when you were able to pause that one short instant. But with your actual reveal on TV, it was kind of lost just because it went by so fast.
Yeah, there's something about that raw footage that we had off the EMCCD that, I mean, Brandon and I were like obsessing over, and he was showing me over and over again. But Brandon actually saw something really cool, and he had showed it to me. And again, these are theories, obviously. There's no definitive answers. We're talking about the paranormal here, you know, not taxes. But like he got a picture of a nurse wearing the full outfit, right? And it was from that
time the 30s. Yeah, the late 30s, early 40s. Yeah.
And it looked just like it was the same
identical.
Shape. It was crazy.
It's creepy. I mean, to be honest, it's creepy as hell. And I think that's probably why it wasn't included in the episode, because it was just a bit much. It was yeah, it was like, holy jeez.
They have to like underplay it, because like people are just gonna be like, okay now, like
they
like
faked it. Yeah.
Yeah,
they're instantly gonna think that. And it's like, okay, yeah, you go get an EMCCD camera and try and use it in the first place and try and fake that. If we were faking that stuff, we'd be making horror movies. We wouldn't. You know,
hell yeah, man! I'd be working for Marvel right now. I'd be like, but the other thing that I forgot to mention, and that wasn't shown on the show, but while Daryl and I were hearing all those sounds, a floor above where Brandon caught that incredible EMCCD footage, we had a camera set on a data logger in another room. So like while Daryl and I left that room, There's nothing going on in that data logger. When we leave the room, we start hearing all the noises and we're freaking out in the hallway. Everything's going off in the data logger. You got pressure changes. You got temperature increasing, decreasing. 2 EMF spikes. It was just, and then before and after that, nothing, nada, zip. It's crazy.
Well, you opened up the proverbial Pandora's box there, Brandon and Mustafa. Now everybody wants to see this photo. That's what everyone's commenting about now. Yeah, Brandon, can we see the photo? We got to see the photo. Where's the photo?
We might release it. You never know.
All
We
right.
might do it.
Yeah, we'll get to work on that.
So one thing that I don't, and stop me if it's something we shouldn't talk about, but it was brought up during the reveal. One of your other crew members had a physical experience right in that same area, not while you guys were trying to debunk what it was. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You talking about with Grant?
Yeah, I'm talking about with Grant. Yeah.
His walkie-talkie. Yeah. That was crazy. I mean, we're sitting there trying to disprove this, right? And initially we had Brian, which you guys saw on the show. He leans out and it's, I mean, night and day. They're not even close. The images.
Yeah.
You can see detail with Brian. You can see everything. You can see even where the side of the wall, there's a shadow actually casting onto Brian. So you can see that whatever this was, again, was absorbing whatever the environment was around it. So you can clearly see the definition, not only Brian leaning out that doorway, but you can see that there was a shadow casted on him. So that makes it even more unexplainable. But Grant goes down to try and recreate it as well. And as he's standing there, all of a sudden his walkie, which was on his hip, gets ripped off of him and just flies about 6 or 7 feet into that room, which is really interesting. And I think you guys use very similar walkie-talkies where you have the clip, right? You clip it on, but there's like a little lip that holds on. So it's not the easiest to even pull out when you're trying to do it yourself. So this thing just gets ripped off and flies off a couple of feet away. And that was, I don't know what to think about that, you know, and Grant was in there and he experienced that. So that was kind of strange for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, that was something. So, yeah, one of the things that I just thought was interesting was the fact that, and it just interesting to me that you guys, for the most part, most of you guys wear almost all black while you're investigating. And on the infrared cameras and the night vision cameras, that comes off as almost brilliant white, right?
Sure.
And then that black figure was like, I mean, it was almost like the complete absence of light is what it was. It wasn't. It was just. I mean, like you said, it's completely paranormal. It's not normal.
No.
I don't know what it is, but it's not normal. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what makes it so interesting. You could look at that footage 1,000 times. You can even see the way it moves is strange. All of it is just very, very odd, and it's something to behold. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I definitely think people are, maybe at some point, I really appreciate what you guys did like last week with your episode where you're asking people to let's hear your opinions. Look at the footage yourself. And I think this piece of footage is going to get dissected and scrutinized and studied a lot.
Good.
I think so. We'll see and see how it goes. So a couple other questions, probably the most important. I want to get real serious here. This comes from. Let's see, who is this from? Sorry, I just want to make sure I get this right. Where did it come from? I think Kim on this. Yeah. So Mustafa, is that a Jeff Goldblum pillow behind you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's wanted to get that out of the get the serious questions out of the way.
That's historic, by the way. That's a historical piece, man. That came from a very distinguished antique store.
Oh yeah. This is Robert E. Lee's Jeff Goldblum.
Nice. No. Great. So, guys, we've been on for about an hour. Do you want to talk a little bit more, or I don't want to. We want to make sure that we don't take advantage of anybody's time.
I can stay out for a few more minutes, like 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Another 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So a couple more questions. You guys did quite a bit of investigating in the officers' quarters, and we had quite a bit of reports of activity there. But you guys didn't really have any experiences there. In fact, interesting enough, if people didn't notice, that's actually where we filmed the reveal. So
Yeah.
we were looking for a nice open place to do it. So we filmed it in one of the places you guys investigated in.
Sure.
So yeah, you guys didn't really have a lot of experiences there. And interestingly enough, most of the experiences that people have shared with us happen in the middle of the day. Like it's tour groups and things like that see, apparitions and things like that. So
exactly. I know Mustafa and Daryl actually took the EMCC camera in there, and they had that in there for hours, right, Mustafa?
Oh yeah. I had to review it all. Yeah, but it was you hear the stories, and I was really excited about those claims, but that's how it is. I mean, a lot of times, and Brandon will tell you, I mean, you've investigated places for months, maybe sometimes years.
Nothing.
So,
Yeah.
I know Daryl says he uses a great analogy about, it's like fishing. You know what I mean? It's like, are you going to the right fishing hole? Are you at the fishing hole at the right time of day? Are the fish biting? So it's kind of a right place at the right time situation. And, part of it is always like, I know that Mustafa believes this too. It's kind of the energy you put out is the energy you receive kind of thing. So, and one of the things in the show, a lot of people are like, why are you guys talking lower and whispering? And well, we're not about to walk into someone's house and claim ownership over it and walk in there and start just, oh, hey guys, how's it? That's not how it works. We want to be very respectful. We want to walk in with a very mild-mannered tone and just kind of put out the energy we want to receive, and in hopes that there'd be some kind of communication. So,
Gotcha. 100%. So Sumi, one of our volunteers and actually someone who's done some investigating out at Fort Stanton, she wants to know and I'm sure this is a question you get a lot, right? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how haunted do you guys rate Fort Stanton? And that's a question, so.
Mustafa?
Oh, geez. Oh, you're going to make me do it. I would say, gosh, the number scale. I'm not going to do the number scale. I will, because there's different kinds of hauntings in different places, But I would say Fort Stanton is pretty freaking haunted. I mean,
I'll give it a 10. I said it in the reveal. They didn't put it in the show, and I said I think you have a haunted property here. I think I really. I mean, come on, what we got there on the MCC camera. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, that is what I've been looking for this for 16 years. And now I experienced it at Fort Stanton. It happens, I think it's just, you guys have the perfect, what I refer to, and I know Mustafa does too, the formula of a haunting. You guys have it. And it's not a negative thing. It's not a scary thing. Not all ghosts and hauntings are scary and trying to terrify you. I think you guys have the perfect mix of history. You have people that truly love the place, just like you're doing now. You have, you want to learn about the oral history, about these gaps that you don't have, the modern history of Fort Stanton. There are people that love that place. So when you pass away, if ghosts are real and there is a life after death, where are you going to go? You're going to go to a place that you loved, not a place that you despise or didn't like. So I think that Fort Stanton has the formula of a haunting. That's what I would say. Definitely.
100%.
Do you guys know a Daryl Marston?
I've never heard of him.
He says it's an 11. He says
I know
it's 11. So,
he doesn't know what he's talking about.
That guy doesn't know anything.
So
it's pretty freaking haunted, man. I mean,
yeah, you guys get a property on your hands, man. And like I always say, there's no better way to introduce people to a history than through the paranormal avenue. That, again, people that typically aren't interested in the historical aspect. Yeah. This brings in people that normally wouldn't go on a history tour or normally wouldn't learn about Fort Stanton otherwise. But now you're giving them an opportunity not only to learn about this amazing, rich history that you have at Fort Stanton, but there is a very strong chance that they can meet and interact with that history. I think that's exciting. And I'm just a nerd when it comes to that, but I love it.
No, it's cool, man. It's awesome.
Well, something a little lighter. Someone was asking, since Fort Stanton's so isolated, and it is, right? It's out. That's what it was built for. It was built for isolation, and that's why they chose to move a tuberculosis hospital there, because it was isolated. People were asking, well, if we come to visit, where can we stay? We're isolated, but Ruidoso is not that far away, and you guys stayed in Ruidoso. We have great accommodations there. It's a great town. Great. We have a ski hill here and things like that, so you can definitely come out and visit. You're not going to have to stay in Albuquerque and drive 4 hours in, but it is still pretty isolated out here. You got to want to get here to come visit. So
you're not finding
food
it
there as well.
Oh, incredible. That menudo.
Yeah.
that was awesome. We had some good food. That was a very enjoyable experience.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. We're kind of wrapping up here. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. Let's see. I got Jeff Goldblum. He's nailed that one.
Very important. Very, very important.
Stole the show, man.
Yeah. I think that was most of the questions that we had. I'm looking, making sure I didn't miss anybody's. I think, like you guys said, I think after the reveal, Grant especially was like, look, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? And I think we definitely would invite any of you or your team to come back at any point. And, Grant gave us all, journals when you guys left to kind of keep jotting down experiences and things. Mine is currently empty. Apparently, Kenny's, he's already on his second journal, and I didn't know it.
Yeah, Kenny's got War and Peace going on. He's all right now. I'm filling it up.
Yeah. But one question, one last question. You guys, you are so respected among your peers for what you do. You guys really get an opportunity to choose in some ways where you go. What was it about Fort Stanton, that drew you here, and how do you kind of go through that selection process? When somebody asks you for help, like I did, said, hey, I got this situation here. What are kind of like your criteria for say, okay, we need to go check this place out?
It's basically a greatest hits of every reason you'd ever want to go and investigate a place. One, the history is very, very, very rich. There's so many different time periods that serve so many different communities. There's so many emotions associated with it. You have some negative things that happen there. You had a lot of great positive things that happen there. And there's a historical importance and cultural significance for the area. Then you also have the fact that there are people there, you guys, who are extremely passionate about the place, and you love this property, and you are living there, and nobody's going to come out and help you. Nobody else is going to come out and help you. So it's uncharted territory. It's a culturally significant place, and we have clients with a real need. And, Billy the Kid, man, I mean, we're sucker for that. That's probably the only thing I saw in the Michael Cameron.
Oh, you guys got to come back and see the rest of Lincoln County. So
for sure. Got to, to piggyback off of what Mustafa said, first and foremost, again, it has, I'm going to use the term again, it has the formula for a haunting, 100%. You guys have that, but you have very credible eyewitnesses as yourselves. You know what I mean? It's not very often that you have people come across that say these things that are as credible as you guys are, and I hate to put it that way, but it's just the truth, because we get a lot of, referrals, a lot of people coming to us that just, it doesn't seem believable. You know what I mean? So I mean,
you want to check the medicine cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. You guys are very credible eyewitnesses, and you guys have that history associated with this place that just, again, I say it again, it's a formula for a haunting. It's just the right conditions, the right environment, the right history. It's all the makings for a place that has activity.
Oh, and another thing I wanted to say is the episodes, even though this one came after Arizona, right? We air our investigations, sometimes out of order in the time that we film them. Fort Stanton is the first place that we used the EMC CD camera in an investigation.
Oh.
In an actual investigation, so like, okay, we're going to put this in an investigation. Let's do it. Fort Stanton is the first place.
Yep.
Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'm glad
More history again. More history.
History, baby. Formula for haunting.
We really do, Fort Stanton is not, it's isolated, but it's welcoming. Like, we're open to we're not open to the public right now, because of the current situation, as we should be. But we will reopen. And when we do, we really would encourage people to come out and experience Fort Stanton. We have events. Steve and the Fort Stanton Friends group, who do so much for the site, they put on an amazing program every year that we are a big part of, called Fort Stanton Live in July, and it's a really good opportunity to come out. And then we actually do after dark tours. You guys experienced Fort Stanton after dark, right? And not a lot of people get to do that. It's a totally different experience. So we do after dark tours throughout the summer and moving into the fall, so people can come out and see that as well. But yeah, I'm really glad that you guys had a positive experience. We certainly did. And it was just a privilege to work with your crew. And, you know, I'm not going to lie. I was rooting for you guys to find something, right? Because you know, I was the one who called you guys, and I said, hey, you know, my staff and my volunteers are seeing things. And then I'm thinking, I really hope they find something. And then when we saw that reveal, I was like, well, this is probably going to put Fort Stanton on the map. So
yeah. I mean, I'll never forget it. That's a moment etched into my mind. Brandon called me up. He's like, dude, I'm like, okay. And I could tell from his voice, and he showed it to me. My first thing is like, there is no way that happened. And then we played it back a bunch of times. I was like, what is this? And it was amazing. It's so cool. So
all right. Well, Steve, do you have anything you want to add before we sign off?
Just that I appreciate it so much, and the exposure's fascinating. I've been getting, of course, all kinds of texts and calls while we're talking, and what a strange world it is. But somebody that used to live in my very apartment in the longest quarters contacted me and said, I had no idea you were there. And he said, I used to live in the longest quarters. I said, really? He said, yeah, apartment 4. He said, I'm in apartment 4. He said, yeah, was there a room that was painted blue with clouds on it? I said, yeah, it's now orange and a lot of red tapestry, but very bizarre. So thanks for bringing the exposure to this site that I think is going to be really cool and very interesting. We don't know. And that particular person, Lewis, is very connected and used to be, maybe still is, a part of the Paranormal Society of Lincoln County. But anyway, just a real neat experience. You guys were part of our family for a little while there, and we greatly appreciated it. And we're really thrilled that it resulted in such a nice episode.
Well, thank you.
Come back.
We'd love to. Love to.
I'll be back.
Kenny?
Great.
I mean, Fort Stanton, obviously, I mean, me and you talked a lot about Fort Stanton's history, especially Mustafa. There's so much there that it's just an amazing site in its own. Even since you guys have left, I have done a lot more research, even mapping out the entire surrounding area, and discovered 2 more cemeteries that we didn't even know about when you guys were there. So, I mean, the layers of history just keep adding, and as we especially start this digital archive, we'll have so much more information about the grounds and the things that have actually been happening there. I do know that someone did mention something about some family members in the listing as well. And I've even started an actual archive of all of the patients and actually the staff that was there for each year. So we are hoping to eventually be able to make a really nice database for people to actually do some of the history and find a lot of the actual things from the past and their relatives. But I mean, I loved having you guys here. And if there's ever anything I can do, even research-wise, or, you know, even just basic stuff about history, I'd be happy to talk to you guys and really enjoyed having you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's about it. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future. And, you know, I, again, just thank you so much for everything you did for us and in helping us in a time of need. And, you know, let us know what we can do for you guys, you know, especially regarding the footage you captured. And, you know, we look forward to working with you guys potentially in the future.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I guess that's it. So I guess until next time, yeah, cheers. Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you guys in the future.
10 out of 10.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you guys. Take care.